Okay, hey everybody, it's Thursday night. Listen, I have Coach Dustin, Coach Brad with me. Welcome to the Education of a Weaponized Man podcast. And tonight we're going to talk about, I want to share with you guys how I learned the power of surprise. So stick with us. We're going to cut to our intro back in 60 seconds. We're going to talk about how I learned the power of surprise.
Many people understand that they can at any time become the target of a violent criminal assault. These same people know that they have a life, family, and property worth defending. Criminals understand that violence is its own language. Violence is not the sport of competition. Violence is not the art of fighting. Violence is about one thing: destruction. There are those who believe that violence, even in self-defense, is morally wrong. Then there are good people like you who know that defending yourself, family, and others, as well as your property, is not only a personal right, but a duty within a civilized society. Understand, violent assaults are won before they occur. People who learn strategy survive. People who do not will not. For those brave people who believe life is precious and worth defending,
welcome to the Education of a Weaponized Man podcast. Okay, all right, everybody, we're back. And listen, we're going to talk about how I want to share with you guys, really. I want to share with you how I learned the power of surprise. Now, listen, there's three things I think that will start off that most people that are weaponizing for violence, if you're truly training for violence, meaning you're training to fight outside your weight class, right? As you know, outgunned, outmanned. They're going to be bigger, they're going to be stronger, they're going to most likely have more weapons, better equipped, better positioning, all this type of stuff. The power of surprise, or the element of surprise, is very, very powerful. And I think most people viscerally have an understanding of that or a feeling for that. But I'd like to kind of break down how this really hit me. Because again, it's like, it's one thing to intellectually understand something, but it's a whole other thing to implement that, to viscerally implement that, right? So the power of surprise. I'll start it by saying this, like, the first time I ever really, I think, experienced this and understood that I had created this, that I had used the element of surprise strategically and tactically, the thing that cued me was three words, and those were, do that again. Right? So I was training and I was sparring a guy that's a great fighter, professional fighter, well-versed in combative sports. And we were not training in combative sports. We were weaponizing, so training for violence. But of course, as we're sparring, this is what he brings forward as his strengths, right? So this is what he does as a professional fighter, so that's how he's attempting to spar. I, however, was not trying to spar with him. I wasn't engaging in that because there's no way that I can possibly beat him. So I was using the weaponizing process. I was using strategy, tactics, and tools. And so in the process of sparring, he's trying to do his thing. He's trying to step in. He's trying to land combinations. He's trying to go for the knockout, right? And I used a strategy on him, what we call a smash and grab strategy, and that led into an avalanche strategy. So basically a smash and grab is how we steal base and balance. So closing the distance in a violent manner. You steal the base and balance, which without base and balance makes him basically a pedestrian. So at that point, it didn't matter that he was a better fighter than I was. So I used a smash and grab, went into an avalanche where you go into termination mode and you do an uninterrupted barrage of using the natural, most brutally efficient tools in the body. So the point is, in the middle of this, he's trying to knock me the fuck out. He's bigger, he's stronger, he's faster, he's better skilled, he's all of these things. And I'm using a different strategy, different tactics. And the second that I did these, the second that I used these two strategies, I implemented them. The second I disengaged, he was down on the ground, a state of shock, right? Utter surprise. And the second I disengaged, because of course I wasn't actually hitting him. I wasn't actually following through with it. I was using thresholding. But he his eyes were as big as saucers. He pops back up to his feet, disorientated, but he looks at me and he screams, "Do that again." And that was the moment, right? Do that again. And it hit me, and I was like, fuck, that's awesome. And he's like, no, do that again. Do that again. And I was like, it's over, dude. Like, that was the end of it. It was over. I'm already halfway fucking home. You know what I mean? Like, you know, you were standing, you were pursuing, you were dominant, and then you were lying on your back, run over like a fucking freight train, and you know, you're jumping up, yelling, "Do it again, dude! I'm already in my car halfway home," kind of thing. But I thought about that after, because later we were hanging out and we were, you know, relaxing and stuff, and you could tell his wheels were turning, and he just sat there and he kept thinking, he just kept sitting there, and he would look at me and be like, "Tomorrow when we train, when we spar, I want you to do that again, like do that thing again." And I just remember being like, dude, like, why would I do it again? And of course, in my head, I'm like, well, yeah, I'm going to do it again because I have no other choice but to try and do it again. Otherwise, I won't survive. But I'm not telling you that I'm going to do it again. But he was just, I mean, this went on for probably 3 hours where he just kept stewing on it. And then it was funny because I really didn't say nothing. I said, well, we'll see what happens tomorrow. And he sat there, and then all of a sudden, he started a dissertation, like a 60-minute dissertation where he was telling me everything that he was going to do to counter that, like to counter my strategies, so that that would never happen again, and how he would, you know, fucking basically beat the shit out of me if I tried that again. And I was like, yeah, all makes sense. So he's just telling me, I'm going to do this, I would do this, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. And I was like, okay, no problem. So the next day we're sparring, and of course, we're just moving around, doing our thing, whatever it is, and you could tell he's just primed. He's just waiting. So he's sitting there waiting. Now, again, there's a lot to this that I want to be able to unpack, but why it was so important to understand that on the next day, he was sitting back and waiting. Think about it this way, guys. And maybe some people can relate to this experience. You're sparring somebody that's a pro fighter. I'm not a professional fighter. He's a professional fighter. You're sparring somebody that has far superior punching power. They have size on you. They have strength on you. They're kicking power. I mean, like, to stand toe-to-toe with this individual is a guaranteed loss. It's just, you're just not going to come out of this well. So on the first day, he's pursuing me. Well, of course he's pursuing me. Why wouldn't you pursue me? Like, he's bigger, stronger, and better, and he fucking knows it. So he's stalking me. He's moving forward. He's stalking me. He's getting into his range. And once he's in range, boom, he's lighting up jabs and combinations and thigh kicks and like he's doing everything at will. So he's just literally, it's just a matter of time till he gets the knockout. But then all of a sudden, I use two strategies, and these two strategies catch him on the blind side. They surprise him. Now, what I'm getting at is on the Sunday, the next day, when he's like, do it again, tells me, this is how I'm gonna, if you do that, I'm gonna beat you, I'm gonna do this, and I'm gonna fucking get you. So the next day, as we start sparring, guess what he's not doing?
Pursuing you.
He's not pursuing me, he's not stalking me, he's not hunting me. What is he doing?
He's sitting waiting for you to surprise him again.
He's sitting there waiting for me to follow his orders and do it again. So he's just sitting there waiting for me to do it again. And so I'm sitting there learning, going, no, you're just waiting for me to do it again. This is clearly a poorly disguised trap. Like, it's so fucking overt. It's painful. So I just sat back because every second that goes by, I'm winning. Because I'm lasting against a professional fighter in his arena of domination, where he has all of the credentials, all the experience, all of the advantages, and he's doing nothing, and I'm just sitting there. So I'm just moving around with him, and I'm like, well, yeah. So then I just start taunting him, like, this is exactly how I thought this would go. What's the matter, boy? Scared? That's right. You better stay away from me, boy. Scared, you know what I mean? Like, and then we're moving around. Every now and then, a little, and you just see him getting red and getting pissed off and getting red. And finally, I see it, the breaking point. Fuck it. And the second he says, fuck it, what's he do? He stops thinking about the counters. He stops thinking about, do that fucking shit again. And he goes, fuck it. And he starts doing exactly what he did the day before. He starts going, fuck it. And he comes into his element and he does what he's been trained to do. He starts stalking and hunting and throwing combos and lining all this stuff up. And guess what I do?
You did it again.
I do it again. I do it again. And guess what the result was?
Do that again.
Exactly. Same thing. Forward pressure, smash and grab, steal his base and balance in an unexpected, unconventional method, get into the avalanche, uninterrupted barrage with using the natural, most brutally efficient tools on the body. Again, I'm thresholding him, so I'm not actually inflicting pain on it, but it's enough to have a professional fighter not only on his heels covering, but on the ground. And on the ground and doing to him what I will, and then disengage. And again, I'm halfway to my car. And he jumps up and is like, fucking do that again. Like pissed off, wants me to do it again. It's just the repeat cycle. So we'll stop the story from this point on because, like I said, just repeat it. But I think it was important to not only share what happened the first day, but to share the process in between the 2 days and then what happened the second day. You see, the do it again, and the more I thought about this and the more I unpacked this, because I had never experienced that before. I'd never had somebody say do it again to me. Matter of fact, most of my sparring was done, especially the early years before I was in the weaponizing, was in the combative sports, in the martial arts. I never had anybody say do that again because I'd never caught somebody on the blind side like that. And I'm not talking about, sparring a guy and you get a punch through his guard and nail him and KO him. I mean catch him on the blind side, the element of surprise. Two boxers are in the ring and a boxer can get knocked out. And yeah, sometimes there's a little surprise to that because you didn't see the punch coming or you didn't expect the angle or whatever it is. That's not what I'm talking about. We're talking about the truest element of surprise. And I'm going to ask you guys a question, and I want you guys to answer this for everybody out there. But there are two core ways that you lose either a fight or a violent encounter. So let's just say there's two ways you lose on a violent encounter. What are those two ways?
The first one is from a line that you're unfamiliar with.
Okay, so the first one is somebody attacks you or fights you from a line that you are unfamiliar with. And the second one, Dustin, you said?
Run out of gas. Don't have the conditioning.
Yeah, you run out of gas. So if we look at these two things, someone fights you from a line you're unfamiliar with, or you run out of gas. Now, running out of gas, losing your fortitude, losing the energy, the vitality, I mean that speaks to itself. If your gas tank is empty, you're a target. You're at the mercy of the enemy. Okay, but let's break down the first one. If someone fights you from a line you're unfamiliar with, that is what creates this surprise. And now hopefully people understand this. I mean, and this was UFC type stuff, right? In 1993-ish. This was Royce Gracie, skinny Brazilian, wearing a gi, standing in the middle of an octagon with no rules, all different styles, pitting, style versus style to determine the ultimate martial art, the ultimate fighter. And they get in there, and all of a sudden you got this Brazilian who's taking people down, tying them up. And that was a great example of line familiarization. People just had not experienced that type of ground fighting. And so you saw what happened. The smaller, weaker guy, didn't matter how big they were, didn't matter how skilled they were, their strength and their skill and their style accounted for nothing because the line familiarization. So they get caught in the blind side. You go to push a guy off, you think, well, he's light, I'll push him off. And as you push off, he's pulling you into an armbar or throwing you in a triangle choke or taking your back or, sweep, whatever. A million different things that he was doing. And so that element is important. And that's what can create that, do that again, because there's a disbelief. It's like, what? How the fuck did that shit work? Because we don't understand it, because I've never seen it before. I don't understand that line. Okay, so I want you guys to give me a little bit of feedback or share with people maybe how in your training career, like how you guys came to understand or recognize or appreciate the element of surprise and the power of understanding that one of the ways that you can lose a violent encounter is to have somebody attack you on a line that you are unfamiliar with, and how that goes beyond just conventional. There's kicking range, punching range, clinching range or close quarter range, and ground. Because we're gonna go deeper than just, because that's what a lot of people viscerally think. Oh, that's it. Those are if you understand the four ranges, then nobody can ever fight you from a line that you're unfamiliar with, right? So if you guys got something, jump in and share that for us.
Even like just before specifically unpacking what you asked, like just to kind of share one thing I think a lot of people watching would at least be able to relate to, even if they've never tried, let's say. And that's, you're home and you think you're home alone, or you think everyone's asleep, or maybe it's your wife. Either way, it doesn't matter who. But you're walking through your house, let's say at night, it's dark, can't really see all that well. You come around a corner and there's a fucking person right there. And you're just like, Jesus Christ, depending who you are, you either maybe backpedal, you startle some way. Maybe you startle forward and they almost get smash and grabbed, depending who it is.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But I think everyone at some point in life has felt that, just that pure element of surprise and what that does to your physiology. And it's just kind of like, that's what we're talking about, being able to create or recreate that same physiological reaction in people by using this element of surprise. I don't know if that hopefully helps people to kind of get exactly what we're talking about. But
It does actually, and Brad, I'll let you jump in here too. But I wrote a note so I won't forget. But that actually helps us in this conversation, Dustin. It's going to help us to kind of separate the line familiarization and what happens and the power of it, and why we need to learn to use this as a strategy and a tactic. Because there's kind of two parts to that, and you just covered one, which is the startle response. So I'll let Brad jump in, and we'll circle back to the second point after that. But yeah, that was a really good point, Brad.
Yeah, I just think that, for me, like, I've always been kind of mislabeled, I guess, which it works in my advantage when I talk about weaponizing and stuff like this. And I think I've shared this with the viewers and stuff before, but people, when I tell them what we do and I talk to them about weaponizing, they're like, "What? You do that?" I would have never thought in a million years. And when I think of that impression that people have of me, it actually reinforces for me the strategy of the Trojan horse, because it allows me to really own that strategy, because people don't view me as somebody that is like a fighter or a badass or whatever it is. So, like, it's one of those things that is like, to use that strategy, to use the Trojan horse, and to use surprise, like, for me, it's always been a foundation of kind of what I've attached to, because people have mislabeled me. They've labeled me correctly, but mislabeled me, if you know what I mean, right?
100%.
Which I like. I love the fact, like, because it just allows me to implement the strategies way more effectively.
Yeah, I love that you came at it from this angle, which is an angle I didn't expect me to get into, but it is so fucking awesome because, again, we're like, you're giving somebody, like, how do you surprise people, right? And I've said it a little bit. I've talked there's conventional training, conventional tactics and strategies, and then there's unconventional. And what you're talking about is, like, there's a typical, like, you're talking about personal impression. Like, I have a self-image, you have a self-image, everyone has their own self-image. It's how we view ourselves. But then every single other person that ever meets us automatically starts to form a picture of us. And that's based off, you got a guy that walks around in a $3,000 suit with a Rolex watch and drives a Ferrari. People are going to draw some conclusions about who that person is, what their values are, what their beliefs are, what they do for a living, what type of person they are, all this shit. And it's no different than perceptions of what somebody believes a fighter is, or someone that is capable of defending themselves or whatever. And so your look, like my look or like Dustin's look, is atypical to what the typical, image would be of somebody who goes, "Oh, that guy's that guy knows how to fight. That guy's a badass." Like that, that guy's trained and weaponized, or whatever, terms we'd want to put to it. That atypical impression that you project, or that people, not even that you project, but that, well, you do in a way, because, like, you're like, I don't dress like a fighter, I guess, you know what I mean? Like, my clothing and style isn't predicated off wanting people to draw the conclusion that I'm trained, right? As a matter of fact, it's the exact opposite. So I almost, like, we understate, our look of preparedness, because that lends itself to line familiarization. And Brad, you had mentioned one of our strategies called the Trojan horse. And most people know what the Trojan horse is, right? And it's a falsehood that precedes the reality. So, you have this Trojan horse, this big giant wooden horse that's left as a symbol as the Greek army flees. And, the Trojans open, oh, look, the war is over. The 10-year war has ended. They gave us this offering as a sign of our superiority. So they open the gates and they wheel in the Trojan horse. And of course, everybody knows that in the middle of the night, Trojans drop out. There's armed men hidden inside of it. They open the front gates. They slaughter everybody. And a 10-year war is ended pretty much with one single event. And the Trojan horse for us is, again, not wanting to project. We don't operate from fighting stances. You don't want to have ready positions, on guard positions where your hands are up and you're in stances and stuff, because all of these things telegraph readiness.
and
Now-
people are a lot familiarized to those things.
100%. And listen, like there's always the caveat, right? There's always the exception to the rule. But if you understand the rule and break it, knowing what the rule is and knowing why you break it, then of course there's exceptions. But overall, putting my hands up against somebody that's a threat to me or my family, and all of a sudden my hands go up, that raises their shields because they're like, oh yeah, fuck, okay. Like you're going to defend yourself, or you think you're going to stand, like, you know. So it's not a smart tactic, or it's a typical tactic, but we get more juice out of the atypical tactic. So I just wanted to clarify that for people, because if people are training for violence, make sure that you are not, or at least that you understand atypical presentations like Trojan horses, like nonviolent postures and presentations. So they are very, very weaponized. You are very, very ready, but they are disguised and hidden, much like the soldiers were inside of the Trojan horse. So it's important for people to understand that, because very few systems teach that. Everything typically starts from some sort of ready or on guard position and goes from there. But that is, you know, that is not. You need to have the atypical strategies when you're preparing for violence. So I love that. So people are going to get a clear picture by understanding that how you dress and how you look, and the fact that we just by nature are atypical from what a fighter would look like. That in itself allows us to use line familiarization and the element of surprise to our advantage. So that was a really, really good one. And then we'll just circle back, because Dustin had talked about the startle response and why line familiarization is so powerful, in the sense that if you can use a line of attack, a strategy, a tactic that they are unfamiliar with, not only can you elicit this startle response, like Dustin, you know, in the middle of the night, you're just not expecting something, and all of a sudden, holy fuck, something's there, and that activates that primal flinch response. So that in that moment where they're startled, there can be an advantage. You can gain a beat or two, especially if you are prepared for that. Like imagine, you know, Dustin's analogy of, you know, walking through your house and then, you know, you come around the corner, oh fuck, and you startle. Well, there's not a big advantage for you because you're the one that got startled. But imagine if the other person knew that you were going to startle. Because have you ever been the one hiding on somebody and they walk in, but you weren't quite expecting them to walk in when they walked in? So not only do they jump, but you also kind of jump too. And you're like, ah, fuck, damn near. I think I scared myself a bit, right? Or there's the times when the guy's coming and you're like, they have no fucking idea. And you're like, oh, this is going to be epic, right? And so you jump out and you get that startle response. And like most times we use that moment when they're in pure terror and defenseless, we use it to die laughing. But imagine if you had nefarious motivations, right? Or you had good motivations, meaning I'm going to defend myself. If you could startle your attacker in the middle of their attack, so they're attacking you, yet somehow you startle them, and then you use that moment because you go, oh yeah, this is totally going to startle them. Why? Because they're never going to see it coming. It's atypical. It's asymmetrical. It's unconventional. And they're never going to see it coming. In that moment, you use that, and that's exactly what I used against that professional fighter. I had no chance of beating him. I didn't even have a chance of being competitive with him. So all I did was have to just manage my distance, to manage the damage he could do, and then use my presentation to draw or bait to get him to overcommit and become overconfident, which he was already confident and he had every right to be, but I wanted him to get even more confident. And then that gave me the opportunity to launch into my smash and grab strategy and into an avalanche, to use two strategies. And it doesn't matter what the strategies are really, but the strategy caught him in the startle response. But here's what I said is the second part that I want to go a bit deeper on. And I want your guys' opinions on this, because not only do you get the startle response, but the startle response has a life expectancy, let's say. Now, there's people that when they get, you watch the videos on YouTube where people are scaring people, and you see some reactions where people freak out and get scared, and that lasts for 60 seconds. Like they don't recover. Like, and they fall over like a fucking frozen goat, lying on the ground. And it's like 60 seconds of just pure joy for the person that scared them, because they're literally, these people cannot recover. And that's hilarious. And then sometimes it's like the startle happens and it's, a fraction of a second to a second, and then they kind of recover. So the startle response is great, but here's what's different. When you use it and you get the startle response, the difference is also how you are attacking them. So it's not just a matter of the when or the manner of the launch of the strategy, because that might startle them, but that will dissipate. It is sustained unfamiliarization, right? It is sustained because the manner in which you are executing the strategy and the tactic, they have no solution for it because they've never seen that before. So think of it this way. The line familiarization and using the element of surprise is a combination of the startle flinch, getting them to startle. And then the second thing is presenting them with a problem that they have never seen before, thereby forcing them to have to problem solve an equation that they've never come across before in the time frame of a compressed violent encounter. See, let's use my story, and this is why I started by sharing this story. A professional fighter who I have no chance against, right? Can't even be competitive, but I can manage the distance. It's hard for a fighter to fight someone who's saying, I don't want to fucking fight you and moving away constantly. Right? It's like, fucking hold still so I can kick your ass. Well, that's not much incentive for me to hold still. So I'm moving away from him. But then I did it in a way where I'm like, ooh, yeah, like I just need you to do what you're doing a little bit harder, commit a little bit more. So I'm going to look even more pathetic, even more vulnerable than I already am, because then it's just like it's blood in the water and you can't resist it. So, and he fell for it. He just started going deeper and harder because he thought, if you're going to run, I will fucking chase you. You're not getting away from me. But then the moment happens where I use a strategy and a tactic and a tool that he's unfamiliar with. So I get the startle response. But the manner in which I continued to execute the strategy, the tactic, and the tool, he had never seen that problem. Nobody had ever attacked him that way. So think of like the UFC thing. Nobody had ever had this little Brazilian dude jump on top of you, and they're going to push away, going, well, I'll just fucking throw him off me. And then he's doing something to their arm, or he's doing something to their arm and their throat, and people are like, the fuck are you doing? Like, you think, why didn't they solve that in that moment? Like, let's say even if the first guy pushed and he got armbarred, why did the second guy push? Why did the third guy push? Why did the fourth, fifth, and the 100th guy, why did they all push when they went to the mount? Because they didn't understand how it worked. And so in my story, he didn't understand how I did it. Now, this is important because later that night, when he kept, do it again, then he was all stewing on it, his wheels were turning. And what was he doing? He's problem solving. See, now he had seen he had seen my solution to him. And it worked. And now here's the thing. Why did it work? Did it work because I was the better fighter? Well, no, we've already established that I wasn't. Did it work because I was bigger, stronger, and faster? No, we've already established that I was not. So why did it work? It worked because he didn't know what the fuck it was. He had never seen, nobody had ever done that to him. Like, he had never seen the strategy, the tactic, or even the tool done like that. But here's the thing. As he sat there, then I said that later that night, he went on an hour-long dissertation telling me everything he would do to counter what I did. Now, do you think that he solved the problem, or do you think that he was way off and didn't understand how to solve the problem? What do you think he was? When he said, I would do this, if you do that, I would do this, I would do this, I could do this, I could do this, I could do this. Do you think he was right, or do you think he was wrong?
I think it depends on the level that you talk about. Like, on a technical level, maybe his counters could have worked on like technical for technical, but that's not what we're really analyzing.
Okay. So yeah, I think not unless you'd have to limit the ingredients of what you did for it to work. You know what I mean? Like, if you took away the element of surprise, you're like, okay, I'm going to do a line you're unfamiliar with, even though now you're not as unfamiliar with it. but don't worry, I'm going to tell you exactly when I'm going to do it. I'm going to give you a warning shot. Well, yeah, then maybe he would have a chance because you've taken away one of the key ingredients to what you were doing.
Yeah.
So, could he do it? Well, no, because there's no way you would have compromised yourself and been like, okay, fine, I'll give you a heads up before I try it.
Yeah. Okay. You're right on both counts here. Let's think about this, because this is what makes this even more interesting to me. Everything he told me that he would do as a counter was 100% right. It would work. 100% it would work. Because what I did to him was not, I used the example of jiu-jitsu. Jiu-jitsu was a style of fighting that had all these techniques in it and leverage and choke points and sensitivity that it didn't matter. I said, why did if the first guy pushed, when the guy mounted him, if the first guy pushed and got armbarred, why did everybody else push? Wouldn't you just watch and go, oh, here's a clue. Don't fucking push him. Keep your arms tight. Then that puts different problems because then he sits up and just pounds you in the face and makes you push. But anyways, the point is, that was harder for people. People were like, we got to study this. Like, we actually have to learn this style of fighting, learn some of the techniques, the sensitivity. We have to learn this shit. So they could not solve the problem instantaneously by just looking at it, experiencing it once and going, I know the counters to this shit. You actually had to learn it a bit. Where what I did to this guy was not like that. It was not, I didn't use a style of fighting that he had never experienced before. I took a tool and instead of using the tool against him like a technique, I applied it through a strategy and through different tactics, which changed it all. And so what I'm getting at is that he was 100% correct. Everything he said he would do to counter me would absolutely counter it. But like you also clarified, like you guys stated, that doesn't make a difference if he doesn't know when it's going to happen, because then he can't get set. But now let's go to day 2. What did he do right from the beginning? He got set.
Changed what he was doing.
He changed what he was doing. So he was like, listen, I know my counters are work. And like, listen, yeah, he's a professional fighter. He's well trained in martial arts and combative sports. So like, yeah, I showed him a problem, an equation that he'd never been presented with. But he had the skills to solve that problem. The only thing that made it different was that I knew he solved the problem because he told me. So all I said, well, here's another problem you're going to have. I'm not going to do it because his desire to solve the problem forced him to have to alter everything he did. So he could no longer pursue me. He could no longer do what he was really skilled at doing. He had to sit and wait. And if he's going to sit and wait, remember, I'm training for violence. He's training for the sport fight. In a ring, you can wait. It'll go to judges and scorecards and the referees will stop and you can get disqualified if you're not he can do that shit. In violence, if he just wants to sit there, I don't have a problem. I just walk to my car, get my car, go home. People say, oh, did you get in a fight? I didn't get assaulted. Why? The guy just stood there 30 feet away from me staring at me saying, do it again and do it again. And I don't know what he was talking about. I just went the fuck home. You know what I mean? Like, there is no problem if the guy won't pursue me because I can just walk away. So I was like, well, perfect. In violence, I'll just stand over here too. But then I'm like, okay, listen, we are here. We are sparring. I'm not just going to literally get in my car and drive away, but make a note. I would, okay? Now that we've acknowledged that, so I've already won. There's more than one fight going on in this little sparring match, and I just won that round, okay? The second one was like, well, this won't be hard at all. Buck, buck, buck. You know what I mean? Look at I knew you'd be fucking too scared. I get you one fucking time and you can't handle it, you little pussy. Yeah, that's right. You better stay away from me, man. Now you know who the king is. Yeah, those belts that you won, fuck it, give it to me. You know what I mean? I'm going to release these tapes. People are going to see the champ on his ass. How hard was it to push a button and get his ego going? So all I needed him to do was go, listen, yes, you solved the problem, but I'm not just going to do it. I'm not going to announce what I'm doing. And the second that I got him frustrated, he just said, fuck it. I don't care about countering your stupid little fucking thing. I'm just going to fucking annihilate you with what I'm good at. And the second he came, he's no longer thinking, because you got to remember, he has not had enough time to train the responses so that they're visceral. right? Like his jab cross or his bob weave is visceral. Had I thrown a jab at him, he would have, bobbed and weaved and slipped and parried and counterpunched. It's visceral because he's been boxing and Thai boxing and ground. He's been doing that shit for years. So in that moment, the second that he went fuck it and went back to what he was doing, he's again unline familiarized. He had not had enough time. So that simple little strategy tactic tool that I used worked again. And it got him again. And I share that because I want people to understand the power of line familiarization. What I did to him was not some, if we're going to use, because I'm talking about presenting a problem and like an equation he's never seen. If I'm going to give you an analogy of the type of math problem, like if a type of problem I presented to him, it was on the scope of about what's 20 plus 5. Like if I put a flashcard up, 20 plus 5, it's not going to take anybody very, very, very long to go 25. But like when you're doing something and all of a sudden it's what's 2 plus 4 and 3 minus 6 and 5 plus 2 and 10 plus 3 and 5 minus 1. Like all of those are such simple problems, but when they're flashed too quickly and in the chaos of other things, they cannot be solved easily. So that's, again, that's power in that. And that is what our 10 strategies in our playbook, our 10 strategies are very simple equations. They're very simple problems. But each of the 10 strategies, what makes them jet fuel, what makes them so effective is they are predicated off 3 ingredients. And these 3 ingredients, you will find them in every single successful operation that has ever been conducted in any special forces group. Okay, like the elite special forces, they're predicated, unconventional warriors, are predicated off speed, surprise, and violence of action. And what I did to him when I used the strategy, tactics, and tools that he was unfamiliar with, the speed at which I executed. Now, I'm not talking about physical speed. I'm not talking like I'm so much faster than him. He was faster than me, but I had certainty. I knew what I was going to do, and I knew that what I was about to do, I just had to find the right moment, and when I did it, it was going to seem so fast to him because he's never going to see it coming. When it's like, the punch you don't see always comes fast and always does the most damage because you don't fucking see it. So it comes out of nowhere, and boom, oh shit. And that's the stuff that takes you out. So I had the speed in that I had full conviction and intention of doing this. I had surprise, not because of just the timing I did it at, that's part of it, but in the fact that he'd never seen it. He was like, what the fuck was that? What? That is not typical. This is not something people do in the fights. So I had that line familiarization of the startle response and the fact that he could not solve the equation quick enough. So I had the element of surprise. And then when I did it like a man who believed this guy could and would knock me the fuck out if he was given even a chance, like just a split-second chance to do it, he would do it. And he could do it. And so my belief was right because now he wasn't trying to be malicious to me. We were just training, but he would have knocked me the fuck out. That's what he does. Professional fighters do. They'll throw a shin kick at your head, and if you don't block it or you don't get out of the way of it, it's going to hit you in the fucking face. And if it hits you in the face, it's going to, whatever happens, happens. So when you have the belief that like, if I don't do this, if I don't execute on this with violence of action, now I thresholded my stuff too, because, he's not ready have thumbs in his eyes and knees in his testicles and elbows across his face and all that stuff and bites and everything else. I thresholded, but when I did it with fucking violence of action. So those 3 elements in combination, right? Speed, surprise, violence of action, allowed me, and the principles we're talking about, line familiarization, gave me the element of surprise. And it worked. And it worked the 2 days in a row. And a matter of fact, that second day, I think I got him two or three more times in the same thing. Because he was constantly going back and forth to, I'm ready, fucking do it. Ah, fuck it. I'm ready. Oh, mother, I'm ready. Like he just, And let me add this part into it too. go away and train. Each of us goes away respectively and trains for 6 more months. Then we come back together again and we spar. Was my strategies, tactics, and tools as effective, or was it less effective when we got back together 6 months later and trained again? What do you guys think?
I think that
I think as effective, and I say that because if he didn't, I don't believe that in just a couple exposures he probably understood the problem enough to go away and problem solve it when he came back. But I mean, it would also depend on the person, because if, on the other hand, if he truly was able to understand how you were successful, he'd have a better chance. But at the same time, it's like if you're really good at, finding the opportunity when he's not ready, even in a sparring match, it's still going to work. What you're doing is still going to work. You won't counter it. That's the beauty of it, right?
Yeah,
that's right. Yeah.
Because even when they know what it is, know what to do, there's always that element of surprise you're looking for. There's always that loss of focus. There's always that distraction. There's always that mental fatigue. Like, there's always going to be an element in that sparring match, in this context, where you're going to have an opportunity to catch him when he's not ready. And now the strategy is going to work every time.
Okay, perfect. And Brad, you kind of picked the other position, and I know you're going to agree with everything Dustin's saying. But how would it have played out if it came back and I was less effective? How is that possible? And it's really just kind of the opposite of what he said. But
yeah, like kind of my first thought went to less effective because he's training. But then I was thinking like, well, what's he training? If he goes back and does the exact same thing that he's always been doing, then I think it would be as effective, if not more effective, because you're still not exposing yourself to the solution to the problem, right? But if he started weaponizing, and started understanding what the strategies and tactics were, then they do become less effective. But still not effective, because of exactly everything that Dustin said.
yes. Okay, here's how this actually went. Go ahead, Dustin.
Look at how long we've been doing this, right? Like, are we not able to get each other? Like, when we spar, are we not able to use these strategies against each other? We've all known about it for 20 years, 30 years. Like, we know what the other guy's going to do. We can still find opportunities to do it to each other. So that's your answer right there, right? There's always an opportunity. Just gets harder to find as people understand it better.
Yes, okay. Now, there's a lot to unpack here. Might not seem like it, but there is. Okay, first let me share what happened with this particular guy. So, in this particular instant, guy's a pro fighter. We see it. I get him in a few times, whatever, and stuff. We leave. We go back. But, of course, this is kind of what Dustin had alluded to at first. The next time we get together, it was just as effective. Why was it just as effective? Because he's a professional fighter. When he went away, he wasn't worried about this stupid little fucking strategy and tactic and tool and the way that I did it that caught him on the blind side, because in fighting, he was never going to face that. Nobody was ever going to do that. And if someone actually went in, because again, most things that are really good in violence, they're not effective in combat sport, not because they're not effective, but because the element of surprise is so important. So the second they would start to be kind of integrated into any type of conventional sport or art, they become conventional, they become known. And the counters for these things are very quick. You know what I mean? Very quick. So it's like they lose that effectiveness, which is why, that you have to understand that's why a lot of that stuff won't translate really well. I've seen guys take some of them and modify them a bit and make them more sport-based, but still maintain some of the line familiarization side of it and be very effective. And they're very effective for a fair part of their career. And then people start figuring out that's something that person does, and they work to counter, especially at the pro level, because they study tape. They study them as a fighter. And they go to all these different coaches and put together a camp that's designed to counter what that guy's doing. So there's a lot of scientific work going into that stuff. So in this situation, it was nothing to him. He just went back and did what he did. So when we came back together, it was like, you fucker. You pull that shit again. right? So that was 100% accurate. What Brad is talking about, and then the other thing I'll share is that over 30 years of doing this, I've have guys that were pro fighters or very highly ranked amateur fighters, and they retire. They're not into that anymore. And yet they recognize that there's a gap. There's a gap in their skill set. Say, listen, if some guy's fucking with me and I can't walk away from it and I have to fight the dude, I don't have any fucking match. The only worry I really have is I don't want to hurt this fucker because I don't want to get charged because it's a fight. And I don't want to get charged with hurting this guy. But that's that anti-social aggression shit. But they're like, there's a gap, man. Violence is fucking different. Some guy's trying to murder me. That's a different. Blitzing me, 3 guys, weapons. So they come to me, and of course we spar. And when I'm sparring and I'm using the strategies, tactics, and tools where they're not line familiarized, the result's the same. You catch them on the blind side, they're down on the ground, they're in the corner, they're overwhelmed. They're like, what the fuck? Like, I've been fighting, nobody's ever manhandled me like that or done like that. And in their brain, I can tell they're thinking, and I'm fucking way better than you are. And it's like, yeah, you're right. But just not at this. And then 6 months later, it's hard. 6 months later, it's harder to do it to them. Why? Because now their focus has changed. Now they are learning. They're becoming line familiarized. Now, one of the things that you said, which is like, we talked about like, even if they become more line familiarized, they still work. Because like us, we've been training together for over 2 decades. And when we spar, we still can catch each other with the strategies. But let's go back to the 2 ingredients. What's different? If Dustin, if we're sparring and you find the right time, or Brad, and you smash and grab, the same strategy, if you smash and grab into me, steal my base and balance, how much quicker do I recover? You can still catch me in it. You can still create the startle, because we're human. We all have the startle flinch. You can still create it, but what element is lost?
The line familiarization.
Yeah, you're not going to catch me on the blind side and keep me there for 5 seconds even, 3 seconds even, 2 seconds even. So you can get that, and then you capitalize on that gap, on that mental stall or that interrupt. You have, and that's what teaches you to use more violence of action, to be more certain, to have more commitment, because that disruption, you don't have the same line familiarization. I'm not really, and even if I'm reeling backwards with no base and balance, my hands are already going into the countermeasures. Because it's like, if I'm a new skydiver and I jump out of the plane and I'm like terrified and then I pull the cord and that fucking primary chute gets fouled up, how long does it take me before I start trying to unfoul it? How long does it take me before I fucking cut away and open up the reserve chute? Now, I might do all that, but how long does it take me to problem solve it? Versus if you're a fucking, you've done 5,000 dives, you jump out of the plane, you pull your cord, and the fucking primary chute gets fouled. The chute isn't even all the way up, and you're like, it's fouled. You're already problem solving before the chute is even, you just know it's fucked. I could tell the second I pulled that cord, I could feel it, the way the air hit it, the way it moved on my body. So you're already in the problem solving mode, or you're cut away and you've already got the reserve out. That's what changes. So, then what does that do to your partner? That forces your partner to stop playing checkers and start playing chess. Start getting better at the timing. Start getting better at, the baiting, like the fakes, the feints, all of the falsehood that precedes the reality, the misdirection, the ruses, all of the things that come on the front end that once again stoke the fire of line familiarization. Like we call it presentation because we don't use fighting stances, but how we present our body or how we draw or how you become a great actor because you really sell like, oh, I'm a little heavy on my feet. I'm a little this, I'm a little vulnerable this. And the other guy just, when you're good at it, he just can't resist. It's like a hungry man and you're putting a roast in front of him. It's like, he's a fucking vegan, but at some point his hunger overtakes him and he dives at that fucking ham or something. You know what I mean? Like he's just got to feed himself. And so all of that starts to enhance. And the only reason I bring this into the conversation at this late part of this episode is because I want people to understand that like if you just come back to basics, you know, it's easy for me to find people that are better fighters than me. I don't have to find pros to be better than me. I can find well-trained, dedicated amateurs that are just better conventional fighters. You know, they're better in a fair fight. You know, they're better kickers, better punchers, better ground fighters. That's not hard for me to find. But in violence, they don't have the blueprint. They don't have the perception. They don't have the lenses that allow them to see what motivates us and where our strategies and tactics come from. So again, very simple things these are not rocket science problems that I'm presenting, but these are problems that they will not and cannot solve in the short time frame of a violent encounter. And you got to remember the whole do it again. That doesn't exist in the street. There's no do it again. There is no second day. There is no night of thinking and brain and problem solving and brainstorming and then another opportunity the next day. The guy that, the three guys that attempted to murder me, I never saw them again. You know, it's not like I jumped up at the end of that or got out of the hospital how many months later and, a year later after all the physical injury and said, fuck you clowns, do that again. Do it again. I fucking dare you to do that again. And here we go, ding, ding, round two. That's not the way the world works. You know, it's only got to work once. Now, maybe there's multiple opponents, but it's only got to work once against each of them. And they're not going to problem solve what we're doing strategy-wise in the time frame of that violent encounter. It's like each guy, it's like if you don't bring it to the fight, it doesn't get to the fight. You know, we bring our playbook, we bring our unconventional, atypical strategies, tactics, and tools, and they are wrapped in speed, surprise, and violence of fucking action. And this is not what people know. They do not understand this stuff. This requires a completely different way of thinking and training. And so in the span of a violent encounter, they only have what they have. And what most even violent criminals have is, their blueprints, and we understand those blueprints, and our strategies are the antidote for those blueprints. So in the beginning of something, you don't have to be a great martial artist or big or strong or a great fighter. Now, if they got a second shot at you, if they went away and trained for 5-6 months, a year, whatever it is, and you guys went round two, then you need to be a better martial artist or a better athlete or a better something. But that is not we've been training for 30 years and I'm not training, even though I'm building better attributes. We do grow and become better as human beings, athletically, physically, all that stuff because of the training. But unlike a professional fighter, I'm not constantly training to be better and better because you're going to fight better and better opponents. Does that make sense? You know what I mean? A big part of a professional fighter is, you got to look for those edges in conditioning and physicality and flexibility and technique and all this stuff. And because you're fighting better and better caliber fighters, and you'll fight a guy 2-3 times sometimes in your career. Other people are watching tapes that, you're fighting one guy, and the next guy that's waiting for you down the road, he's in the audience watching you, studying you, training with some of your same coaches probably for a shot that might come 3 years later. He's mimicking your style. So that is what creates this really cool thing for them of like bringing out the best of the best. But for us, it's different. So yes, I want to be conditioned. Yes, I want to be healthy. Yes, I want all these things. But our shit is life and death, and it's like one game of life and death poker. And when you're playing single hands of life and death poker, and then if it happens again, it's against a whole different person. You're not struggling to gain all these new tricks and tips and little, things, right? You're not amassing stuff. You're constantly refining. David and Goliath. You're just making sure you got the pebble and you know how to fucking whip it out of that slingshot. You get what I mean? Because it's not going to be the same giant next time. But the next guy won't have any better understanding that fucking rock's coming at his head than the first guy did, kind of thing. I don't know. That was maybe a weird analogy, but Nonetheless,
Yeah.
I went biblical, kids.
I got an analogy too.
Yes, there we go.
Two analogies.
Perfect.
Both
You got to save me
both-
because mine were weak.
both hunting analogies. So in the first, the similarities we have. So first, the hunter. How are we similar to a hunter? No way we're firing a warning shot. Nobody goes hunting deer, fires a fucking warning
I
shot.
love that.
So same thing in violence, right? There's no warning shot. Like my whole game plan is not going to be preceded by a warning shot, right? And then on the flip side, it's like, okay, what do we have in common with the deer? If you fuck up and you miss your opportunity, you don't get to do it again. I'm not giving you a second chance. I'm fucking gone,
Yeah,
right? So it's just like,
Yeah.
Anyway,
it's good.
silly, but
No,
makes sense.
beautiful analogy. Yeah, I love that. I got nothing to add to that. That was great. I'll let that image sit in people's minds. That's really, really good. And you used it from both sides, the hunter and the deer. That's awesome. Yeah. Brad, anything to throw in? You got an analogy, buddy?
I don't have any analogies. I'm sitting here thinking, like, I don't know.
Just make something up. Like, if Humpty Dumpty had never fallen, I don't know. Just fucking come up with something, man.
And you're done.
And you're done. And mute. Okay. I think we've done a pretty good job of fleshing this out a little bit. I hope again, my goal, in the last few podcasts, I've been really kind of trying to narrow my focus in terms of really wanting to help people solve problems. I've been thinking back on some of the moments over my 30-year career that have really made a difference, and it has been when one of my instructors or mentors or somebody that I looked up to didn't so much, it's almost like they stopped trying to teach me in that moment, and they kind of shared with me how they solved that problem. Because, the problems are the problems, and we all perceive them differently. We all experience them a little bit differently at different times in our lives and in different ways. But the problems are the problems. And when you kind of hear how somebody faced that problem, typically it's a failure. Like we don't really know something's a problem until it costs us something often. And then you kind of hear how they overcame it. It just makes it a little easier to go, okay, listen, now I have a better understanding of how I can apply this to my life. And I've started to want to shift our perception, and we've had brief conversations about this, but I really hope that I'm trying to really look at everything that we're putting out here in the idea that there is somebody out there that's maybe just in their garage, maybe they don't have access to the type of training they want, like the weaponizing process. It's not like it's easy to find or on every street corner. But there's somebody out there that thinks about defending themselves and their family from violence, that is, researching, trying to find the right information stuff. And it's like, I want this to be a resource so that people can come here and actually go, okay, this is how these guys did it. I'm going to start putting this into my training. So today, the takeaway has to be that whatever your strategies, tactics, and tools are that you're using have to get outside of typical or symmetrical training. It cannot exist on the same plane as boxing and kickboxing and jiu-jitsu. It's like you got to get atypical, you got to get unconventional. And so to be very specific, our playbook, 10 plays, like the Trojan horse, the smash and grab, the avalanche, the bait and switch, the Red Rover, and I know that these terms don't mean a lot to most people, but if you dig through and our YouTube channel and you get through our Facebook page, you can find where we are explaining what these are. We're breaking these down, and actually, I have a whole series that I've been working on where we're going to start breaking these down again. I'm going to kind of do it again and share these with people so that these resources are there for you, so that even on your own, you can start the weaponizing process and change the game for yourself. Be able to actually survive a violent encounter, become that protector, ready, real, resilient, relentless, and ruthless in the face of violence, right? Because that's what this is about. This is simply a process for mastering the tool of violence. It's the mental and physical process. And I want to make sure people have that. We need to put this out into the world. So having said all that, please make sure you like, follow, share, comment. If there's something that we're talking about that you're like, I've never heard of that, I don't know what you're talking about, ask, leave a comment. We'll break it down for you. This information needs to get out there. That is our mission in life. Our passion is to share this, help people weaponize, and that's the gist of it. So, anything for either of you guys tonight to wrap up on?
Yeah, nothing on my end.
Yeah, I would end with that deer analogy, hunter analogy. That was solid shit. So just fucking drop the mic and walk out. All right, guys. Well, thank you guys so much for your time. I appreciate it. And again, like, follow, share. But everyone, listen, please stay safe, stay weaponized. We appreciate you, and we will chat again soon, everybody. Have a great night. Hey, thanks so much for listening. And listen, if you found this content valuable, here's 3 different ways that I can help you weaponize for free. First, grab a free copy of my ebook, The Education of a Weaponized Man. To get your free copy today, head to ebook.awakentheprotectar.ca. Number 2, you can take a free workshop where you will discover the 10 insights violent criminals don't want you to know. To take this workshop, head to workshop.awakentheprotectar.ca. The third way is to head to my website and check out all of my Freeline programs that cover everything from mindset to strategies. To check us out, go to awakentheprotectar.ca. And finally, leave a 5-star review so that we can reach more good people like you who are ready to weaponize and rise regardless.